If you're running a slump recently and you don't feel like you've made much progress, it's probably because you're not actually training in Zone 2. Today we're going to find out what Zone 2 training is and how you can use it to make yourself a better runner. This video is essentially the full guide to zone training. I've condensed absolutely everything into very simple terms. Luckily, there's a special test that can accurately determine our zones. It's called the Lactate Threshold heart rate test. Now that sounds complicated, but I'm going to make this really simple for you. Here's how to do it. Step 1 is complete a 30-minute time trial all by yourself. No training partners and not in a race. Step 2, 10 minutes into the test, we're going to bump the lap button on your heart rate monitor or watch. Step 3, when the 30 minutes is done, look to see what your average heart rate was for the final 20 minutes. That average is your lactate threshold heart rate. Simple. Now here's a little tip for the test. Try keep your pace consistent. It'll provide the most accurate results. This means not burning yourself out in the first 2 minutes and slowing down for the remainder. We're trying to keep a constant effort throughout the entire run. This test tells you the exact point where your body switches from aerobic to anaerobic, or in simple terms, the point where your body starts to fatigue at a rate that's far quicker than when you're at rest. So how is this useful for finding Zone 2? We can determine our zones by using percentages of the test result. So let's take a look at each zone one by one. Zone 1 is a recovery zone. This zone is used as a warm-up into more intense zone work. You can train here by keeping your heart rate lower than 85% of your lactate threshold heart rate. This is a very slow pace where you could easily hold a conversation. There's not too much else of interest that goes on here. Zone 2 is the endurance zone. This is the key one. This zone improves our ability to run for a longer period of time. It also allows us to better use fat stores to produce energy rather than tapping into the carb stores in the body. In order to train for endurance, you should train between 85 and 89% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Similar to the recovery zone, this is a steady pace, where you could hold a conversation. The difference, however, is that it's difficult to maintain that conversation in this zone. Zone 2 training also develops what's called slow twitch muscle fibers. And this is actually the main benefit and the biggest thing I want you to take away from this video. We'll dive further into why this is all so important after we've gone over the other zones. Zone 3 is the tempo zone, known as the grey area. Training here doesn't really have much benefit for endurance. You should try avoid this zone if possible, but if you wish to, you can train tempo by running at 90 to 94% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Zone 4 is the sub-threshold zone. This zone improves your ability to use carb stores as fuel when running. This is the point just before we start to see build-up of lactate, and I'll go over exactly why this is important after we've looked at these zones, but for now, just know that build-up of lactate is what causes that burning feeling when we run at higher speeds. Zone 4 training also improves your tolerance to lactate and the efficiency of your running form. To train your sub-threshold zone, run at 95 to 99% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Zone 5, the VO2 Max zone. This zone is split up into 3 subzones which have a slightly different effect. Zone 5A, the superlactate threshold zone. Training in this zone decreases the amount of lactate that you produce when you run fast. To train in Zone 5A, we want to run between 100 and 102% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Zone 5B is the VO2 Max zone. VO2 Max, by definition, is the amount of oxygen that your body can use during exercise. Training in this zone will improve exactly that. Similarly then to Zone 5A, the VO2 Max zone decreases the amount of lactate that can be built up when running fast. To utilise this zone, run at 103 to 106% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Zone 5C is the anaerobic capacity zone. This zone basically improves your ability to maintain sprints, and we can train here by running at anything above 106% of your lactate threshold heart rate. Okay, so that's all the zones covered. Please now do me a quick favour and hit the like and subscribe button now if you are finding this video useful so far. If you do need a quick reference for the zones, I'll also leave all the percentages in the description of this video. So now we know the zones, let's take a deeper dive on how Zone 2 training actually helps us run faster, and I'll try and make this simple as possible. When we run fast, we stop using fat as our main energy source and we start using carbs. This is because we're using our fast twitch muscle fibers. These are the parts of your muscle that are responsible for quick force output, and they produce something called lactate. When lactate builds up, it creates that burning sensation inside the muscle, which causes us to stop running. So it's important then that we remove it. So how is lactate actually cleared? Lactate travels from fast twitch fibers into slow twitch fibers. These are the parts of your muscle that are responsible for low and slow force output. They contain mitochondria, which reuse the built-up lactate to recreate energy within the muscle. So it's important then that these slow twitch fibers are also trained, as they can clear the lactate better. So how do we train these slow twitch fibers? Well, we do exactly that in zone 2. Slow twitch fibers enable the fast twitch fibers to operate without excessive lactate buildup. So when race day comes, you're far better equipped to run faster for longer. In very simple words, you need to run in zone 2 to run fast. So what would some example workouts look like? To create a workout, we have to think about which energy system we want to improve. In running, there's 3 main systems that we want to focus on. These are endurance, lactate threshold, and VO2 max. Each of these systems correspond to a place in the zone chart. Let's first look at endurance. As we know, endurance can be trained in zone 2. An example session is really easy to put together. Simply keep your heart rate in zone 2 and go for as long as you comfortably can. It's literally that easy. Next, let's give an example for lactate threshold training. Like I mentioned earlier, this can be trained in between zone 4 and zone 5A. Keep the intervals between 5 and 60 minutes and make sure that for every 5 minutes of threshold running, you also recover with 1 minute of rest. An example session includes 2 10-minute repeats in between zone 4 and zone 5A with 2 minutes rest in between. Just make sure that we take more time warming up with dynamic stretching or a light jog before you run at faster speeds. Lastly then, let's go over VO2 Max, which can be trained in zone 5B. To train this system, keep the intervals between 30 seconds and 7 minutes. You should also use a 1-to-1 work-rest ratio here. Some VO2 Max training example sessions include 30-second repeats in zone 5B with a 30-second rest. So how much should we train each system then? I like to use something called polarized training. This includes 80% of all running volume to be in zone 2, 15% to be in threshold, and 5% in VO2 max. Just how we progressively overload in the gym, we want to do the same with our running plan. And in order to do this, we can aim to add 5 to 8% of extra distance each week across the 3 different runs. And this will reduce injury risk. For the threshold and VO2 max run, when you can't add distance, just simply increase the speed. Okay, that is all for today guys. If you want to see exactly how I use the concept in this video to bag a sub 20-minute 5K, definitely go watch this video next.